Hey, this is Meridith Elliott, Powell, and you know what time it is? Well, maybe you don't because we're a little early this morning. My fault. I've got a couple of things on my to-do list today, but it is time for Sales Logic, the show where we dive into the strategies, discuss the steps, everything that you need to know to make sales logical and effective. I'm hanging out here with my partner, Mark Hunter. How you doing today, Mark?
I'm doing great. We got a great show because we're going to talk about your pipeline, not your pipeline, but our viewers, our listeners' pipeline, in terms of how to unstuck that stuck pipeline.
All right, let's go ahead and start the show. All right, Mark, it is early Saturday morning and time for Sales Logic. Now, before Mark tells you everything that is on tap for today, I like to tell you how the show works. We always start off with a question from you, the audience. That's right. We want you to be a part of Sales Logic. So if you have a question, you have a thought, you have something you want us to discuss right here, then just send it to Mark, send it to me, go to saleslogicpodcast.com. We have a hot topic, we cover a book, and because we want you to leave with return on investment, we have a lightning round. So Mark, what is on tap for today?
Well, like we said, we're going to talk about how to unstuck that stuck pipeline. It almost sounds like whatever. But hey, we've all been there because we've all had stuff in our pipeline that shouldn't be there. But the question today comes to us from London, and it's, hey, I sell in tech. I love the show. Listen every week. But the problem is I'm in tech and I've got stuff in my pipeline that is just not moving through. What's happening? I've never encountered this problem before, but I'm living it day by day right now. So that's the question. So, hey, I threw it into the Sales Logic brain. And let me tell you something. It came back with some really good stuff. First of all, it said, it said some basic stuff, but it really said some things. First of all, you got to look and listen to your customers more because, again, customers' needs have changed. And what you thought you had as an opportunity is no longer an opportunity. So you got to listen to your customer. One other thing it said, listen to your existing customers, because your existing customers are going to help point you to new things that are happening in the marketplace. Third thing it said, look at your pricing, not necessarily lower your pricing, but look at how you present it and how it's packaged up. Because again, there may be variables, there may be options you need to play. Just a number of the things that the Sales Logic brain shared to help this person unstuck the pipeline. So what are your thoughts?
I think that I love this topic of unsticking a stuck pipeline because pipelines get stuck. They just do. And it isn't your fault they get stuck. What happens is the marketplace changes. And first thing I want you to do is to shift your paradigm about a stuck pipeline. It's not bad news. It's good news. It's exactly the information you need that it's time to refresh your sales strategy. Something you're doing isn't working. Think of it like this. Think of it like you're working out. You're trying to get in shape, like you're like Mark Hunter and you're getting ready to run a marathon, right? And you're getting in shape for it. And all of a sudden, your times don't improve or you don't feel as good or something isn't quite working. That's an indication that it's time to shift up the pipeline. So all this is telling you, Rochelle, is that you need to, number one, analyze in the last 3 months what seemed to be moving the pipeline forward and figure out where the pipeline's getting stuck.
Hey, I'd have to say you're almost becoming like me in terms of becoming an eternal optimist because you said the stuck pipeline is a good thing to have. Wow. Yeah. I can't believe it. But you're right. It is. See, the fact that you've got stuff in there says that there is something there, but we got to figure out what's wrong with it. So you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but you do have to drill down and you do have to get real because here's the thing. If after you've gone through and done this more deep research and really understand, am I talking to the right person? Because this is so often why you have something in your pipeline. The customer, the company might be right, but you're speaking with the wrong person. So you got to ask yourself, am I talking to the right person? 2, do I understand their time frame as to when they're going to make a purchase? This is a question you've got to ask very early on in every deal. What's your timeline for making a decision? And what's your process for making a decision? So many things in our pipeline can get unstuck if we just know those facts. But here's the deal. Too many salespeople, and Rochelle, this may be you. You may be afraid to ask that question too early. No, you can't ask that question early enough.
Let me, kind of in keeping in line with that, and I've talked about this so many times before, but you need a grid because you've got to figure out if what in your pipeline is the right or the right leads in your pipeline. Far too often, and I get it, you got a sales manager that wants you to have a full pipeline. And so, quite frankly, you put crud in there. You put stuff that it may not close for a long time. I am guilty as well. I was just going through my CRM this morning, and I've got stuff in there that, quite frankly, just needs to go, or it needs to go. I never completely kick anything out of my pipeline, but I wouldn't call it in my pipeline. Like, let's define what gets in a pipeline, and it can't get in a pipeline until it is an active deal. That is so incredibly critical. Just because you called on them doesn't mean they're in your pipeline. So I've talked about this before. I use a 9-step grid, and they've got to meet 6 of my 9 to get into my pipeline. So what are you doing to actually grade and determine that they should be in your pipeline?
I love that. Now, here's something else to do with your pipeline, because so many times companies have pipelines set up, individual producers have pipelines set up that once you get the lead, you put it in your pipeline, and it's automatically assigned a probability of 10% or something like that. No, you need to have a 0 probability. If this is something that you're calling on, I have several accounts right now that I am actively calling on. There is no traction yet whatsoever. So if I were to put them into my CRM in a normal level, it'd have like a 10% weight or 15% weight. And sales managers jump on this. Well, how come it's not moving? No, you need to have a 0 level. Now, I know this is getting a little technical, a little wonky, but I'll tell you what, I've seen this with companies I've worked with, and it saves them dramatically because it helps them to see, okay, this is somebody I'm calling on, but there's no opportunity that has been defined yet. Just as you said, you kind of move it over someplace else. Yeah, I've got kind of a marketing pipe where, okay, it just stays in my marketing pipe. But I have some others that I do want to call on, but I can't assume they're in my pipe.
So let me ask you this, Mark. So let's assume that what's in your pipeline has met the 6 of the 9. Let's assume what's in your pipeline is an active deal. Let's assume what's in your pipeline has real probability and it still gets stuck. How do you unstuck? How do you unstick it?
Well, that's the question that you got to go back to what I said at the beginning in terms of, am I dealing with the right person? Am I dealing with the right person? Do I know what their timeline is for making a decision? And have I been able to get them to clearly articulate to me what the challenge is they're having? So many times what happens is we just think it's a good fit. Oh, we think I'm a good fit. I think I know I can sell it. No. Has the customer told you this is the solution they have and this is how you're going to help them? If they haven't said those things, then guess what? You really got to question why it's in your pipeline. And you may have to say, you know what? I need to back it up and put it in at either that 10% or that 0%. So it doesn't plug up your pipeline.
Yeah, sometimes I think too, I'm so curious what you would think about this. Sometimes I think it's okay just to be blunt with the customer. If you build enough of a relationship there, to sit down and say, Mark, we've been talking about this for a while. From my understanding, this is an urgent need in your organization. Tell me what's holding you back. Tell me where the sticking point is. Tell me what I need to answer for you, what I need to talk about, what I need to go through that would help move this deal forward, and just be open with it. I'm curious your thoughts about that.
I totally agree with that. And you may need to say, hey, you know what? It is time for me to go find you a different vendor for you to work with. There may be somebody else that you need to. I'm not just see, many times what happens is we have to realize we may satisfy our customers short term by not being the one to sell to them. In other words, we actually help the customer more by pointing them into a different direction, because maybe what we have is just not quite the right solution. Okay, fine. Help them find the right solution. But you know what you've done? You've helped the customer. You've stayed in the game for the long game. And this is what you have to realize. Every opportunity you have has a short game and a long game. Be prepared that there may be times I don't get the short game, but I'll win the long game.
Yeah, love a comment from our mastermind buddy here, Hugh Hornsby. Great conversation. Alignment is key for creating success. Asking the right questions of the client is key. Then listen to them. That is so. Oh, what a soft statement, right, Hugh? But so powerful. You've got to listen, like really pay attention. I'll give you a great example. I used that blunt strategy with a client not too long ago, and I just said, help me understand. I feel like we've dotted our I's, we've crossed our T's, we've gone through everything. Help me understand where you're stuck. And what happened was they had a huge IT breach. Most of my clients had this huge issue with United Healthcare. And quite frankly, that cybersecurity breach just took a hold, it took precedence over everything else that was going on. Now I understood where we were. Now I understood why all the resources in the organization were going towards cybersecurity. And it wasn't that this wasn't important. Cybersecurity was just on fire. You have to don't be afraid to have the conversation with the client, because you're truly a partner and you're truly trying, as Hugh said, to listen and to understand so that you can either give them a different perspective to move them over the hump, or pull back if they have something more present. If I had continued to push when my client was dealing with a cybersecurity breach with United Healthcare, I would have lost that entire deal, because it's insensitive for me to try to get the deal closed when they are literally dealing with a major crisis in their organization.
See, I love that, because what you're doing is you're coming over to the customer side. You're understanding the world through their lens. Because again, you could push. The deal's not going to close, but you push, and you're going to be kicked out very quickly. But if you come alongside and understand where they're at, this is why we have to be prepared. And again, one of the things that I challenge people when their pipeline is stuck, I really question them. What's the level of confidence? What's the level of trust between you and the customer with that opportunity that's in the pipeline? Because so many times what happens is it's a one-sided conversation. It's one-sided. It's a salesperson making all this assumption. Hey, assumptive selling, okay, that may be a closing technique, but it's not the way that you determine what goes into your pipeline. And again, this is where so many salespeople get into problems. But I got to call out right here, the unstuck, to unstick the pipeline. Sales managers, are you guilty? Are you guilty of pushing your people to have stuff in their pipeline
Yeah.
that should not be there? Because if you are, you're just creating a sewer pipe. And what you want is a water tap. So let me tell you something, sales leaders, you got to buck up, and you may be getting heat from up above. You may be getting heat from VP of sales, CRO, whatever, or you may be the VP of sales. You may be the CRO. And you're getting heat from the board, CEO, whatever. You have to buck up and say, hey, this is not the way we run sales in this company.
Such an incredible point, that it isn't about. I mean, a pipeline is really about quality over quantity, and we have all been guilty of it. And you do feel pressure at times, but here's the thing about pressure. If you're a sales manager, I always felt this way. I always felt like I used to call it winning the war on my belly. And that was that I was going to let the bullets go over my head, and I was going to crawl on my belly to the finish line. Because at the end of the day, if I closed more deals than anybody else in the organization, then nobody cared how full my pipeline was, how many little stupid campaigns I won or I lost. At the end of the day, what I was going to get graded on was I the top salesperson in the company? So you have to realize that if people are yelling at you about the fact that you have 15 in your pipeline versus 30 in your pipeline, just turn a deaf ear and just focus on getting the quality in there and really working with those clients. Because if you sell more than anybody else at the end of the year, you're going to be in great shape.
A key measurement that I look for in any pipeline is what's the speed? What's the speed that it goes from lead to a qualified prospect to close? And my objective in everything I do is to find ways to reduce that length of time. And again, that's what I look at. And sales leaders, ask your people this question: what is the length of time it's taking deals to move through? Because this is a metric that I think you need to be focused on, because this is going to expose the bad pipe very, very quickly. This is going to expose the stuck. because if there's stuff that's not moving through, because here's the situation. If I've got stuff in my pipeline and I've gone through a couple of cycles and it hasn't moved a stage. In other words, every pipeline set up where you got, 4 or 5 different stages that it moves through. And if you've gone through a couple of cycles and it hasn't moved, I got a question. Why is it in there? If maybe what I need to do is I need to move it, but I need to move it down. I need to move it down to less probability or ultimately move it out. But I can't do that unless I'm having conversation. Natalie, another great member of our mastermind, understanding where the customer is so important. Have the conversation early in the process. I can't stress that enough.
Yeah, I think you're bringing up such a great point of measuring the pipeline and understanding the length of sale. It's one of the first questions that I always ask a sales team when I go in and work with them. I'm getting ready to go work with one up in Pittsburgh in a couple of weeks, and we're just really talking about what is the length of the sale? How long should we expect it to be in the pipeline? Now, every sale is different, but what I'm going to keep in my pipeline if the length of a sale is 3 to 6 months versus what I'm going to keep in my pipeline if the length of a sale is 18 months is very, very, very different. And being honest with yourself, I've got some stuff that I just took out of my pipeline because I was getting ready for this podcast. And I was like, yeah, I got some junk in there too. But I was like, are you kidding yourself? It's not going anywhere. Get it out of there. I can leave them as a touch point. But I'm not going to literally what is in your pipeline is what you should believe is going to close and go on the books. If you do not believe that, if you do not have evidence that this deal is moving forward, it does not belong in your pipeline. It may be a lead, but it is not in your active pipeline.
Two things that I look at is how many touches is it taking me to close this deal? And again, if I've got this deal that I'm having to keep touching, reach out to them, contact, have a conversation, and it's not going anywhere, then you know what? It's stuck. I'm not asking the right questions. Something's not happening. But the other thing that I look for is it a one-way conversation? Oh, I called them, but they didn't respond. Oh, I called them. I emailed them. They didn't respond. That customer, that prospect has gone radio silent on you. They're not buying from you for some reason. Why is it in your pipeline? When I review people's pipelines, and I see all these contacts being made, all these, I sent this email, did this, but there's no response. I got to challenge, why is that in there? And I'm going to do what I said earlier. I'm going to take that lead. I may think it's good, but I'm going to move it down to stage 0 in my CRM if I even keep it in there.
Yeah. So let's kind of do a recap of basically where we are. So if your pipeline is stuck, number one, really ask yourself, does it belong in the pipeline? Have you done the due diligence on it, to ensure that it belongs in that pipeline to begin with? Second is, what are you doing to really understand why it is stuck? Are you talking to the customers? Are you figuring out why why it is stuck and trying to do what you need to do to move it over the edge to basically move it forward? And last but not least, really, again, grade and be honest. And if it doesn't belong in the pipeline, then get it out of the pipeline. Focus so much on quality versus quantity. And is it the right lead to begin with? Is this the right lead that goes into your deal? You can unstick a stuck pipeline, but only when you are dealing with clients and prospects that you can actually move forward.
And that means you're dealing with the right person. And again, because many times what happens is you may be dealing with somebody who gave you some love initially, but they are not the decision maker. They're not the person that can help control a decision. And that makes a big mistake. Hey, great conversation this morning.
Yeah. So our book today is John Doerr, Measure What Matters. Now, I know this is something that's really important to Mark, but boy, if you want to move an unstuck pipe, if you want to unstick a stuck pipeline, measure what matters. Far too often we have measurements and we're tracking things, and we hear Mark say this so much that it doesn't really matter. Who cares if we moved that? Who cares if we moved that number? If you measure what matters, you're going to measurement. And one of the reasons that, Mark called me out for being an optimist at the beginning. I don't think I'm an optimist. What I think I am is a realist, but I love data. I really, really love data. And because data is information, it tells us what is going on. And when the pipeline isn't moving, it's the most critical information that you can have to understand what needs to shift in your pipeline.
So Meredith just said, I live in a Pollyanna world. Okay.
No, I didn't. I just
I'm
said
joking.
I just said I'm not an optimist.
Hey, this is the key thing about this book. Just because you can measure it doesn't mean it should be measured. And that's what this book does a great job of calling out. And it's so important because, again, keep your focus on the focus, deals that are going to close for you. I love Hugh's comment. We do not talk enough about the importance of this in our success. Slow down, make it intentional. Early on in the process, we got to slow down to make sure we're putting the right stuff in our pipeline. It's good. Hey, ready for the lightning round?
I want to say one last thing about pipelines before we jump into that. I'm just going to tell you guys what I measure every month. I measure how many sales calls I make, how many leads, how many proposals I write, then how many proposals close, and how many I lose. And here's what I know is that I need to, the sales calls numbers, what I'm trying to track is how many sales calls does it take me to get 8 proposals written, 4 proposals won, and 2 proposals lost. That's the average I'm looking for. And it's interesting to me, in the last couple of months, last 4 to 6 months, I have had to add 1/3 to the number of sales calls I make to get 8 proposals, 4 written, 4 won, and 2 lost. It's taking me more sales calls than it used to. That's why I'm saying I love the data, because I can kind of see what it's taking me and what needs to adjust and change. But okay.
That's what's so important. It's understanding your metrics, because if all you were looking at was the closed deals, you wouldn't understand why or what's happening. You got to understand your metric. Can't stress this enough. Know your metrics, because your metrics will guide you to the results you need to achieve. Great.
All right. So the lightning round is top 10 sales trends for 2024.
Why don't you go ahead and go first? Go.
Oh, well, I mean, the biggest one out there has got to be AI, correct? I mean, that's probably the biggest sales trends, is watching sales teams use artificial intelligence as an asset, not as a replacement for the sales call.
I'm gonna jump on that even more, because it's using AI wrong, because people assume that AI is going to tell them everything. AI is an opening tool. It's not a finishing tool.
Yeah, I would say that another trend in 2024, one to be mindful and one to jump on, is really aligning your sales and marketing. It's probably more important than it has ever been.
I'm going to add the economic uncertainty. Every quarter, it seems like, well, next quarter is when the economy is going to go south. I mean, we just don't know, but it's a trend that continues, and it's leaving people in a real state of confusion as to what to do.
Yeah, number 5, the fact that the consumer truly controls the buying cycle. I mean, we talked a moment ago about AI, but that has supercharged their ability to have information, gain information, educate themselves, and quite frankly, buy without you.
Another trend is every organization is looking at their headcount very tight. I see leading companies, Gallup Corporation, great company. They've got a headcount freeze on, absolute headcount freeze. Companies that normally would never look at things like that are suddenly looking at that.
Yeah, I would say that number 7 is that existing customers will take priority over your new customers. Holding on to existing customers, deepening and expanding those relationships is a priority and a trend for 2024.
Another trend is there's more decision makers involved than ever. I mean, this has been going on for 5, 6, 8, 10 years, but there are more decision makers involved in every single decision being made.
All right, number 9 is, this one is near and dear to my heart. We are seeing in-person sales creeping back. It is becoming more important to get face-to-face once again.
I love that one, because along with that, it means that people are having more meetings than ever. There's a trend that, because it's a conversation that is happening at all levels of every organization. Hey, this has been absolutely a great show this morning.
Yeah.
And we want to say thank you for listening to Sales Logic. If you like what you hear, subscribe, rate, and review the show on your favorite podcast app. If something we've said has earned you a single dollar, consider telling a friend about our show, because it's how we grow when we help you grow. I'm Mark Hunter.
And I'm Meridith Elliott Powell.
Remember, when you sell with confidence and integrity,
all of this uncertainty suddenly becomes your competitive advantage.
And the sale becomes logical.
All right, 2 quick things. Number 1, if you are not part of the Sales Logic Mastermind, jump out to the Sales Logic Podcast website. Check out the Mastermind. Boy, if you are ready to make these last 2 quarters of the year really powerful, become a part of this mastermind. And remember, subscribe to our podcast, leave us a review, and put your questions out at saleslogicpodcast.com. We'll see you right back here next week for another episode of Sales Logic.